Hey y'all, welcome back to Sidewynders Shed. I'm out on the back porch today. Um, Wanted to go over a little bit about seasoning and what that means. Now, the word seasoning has been thrown out quite a bit, and it does have several different meanings. Um, it's kind of like there, and there, or two, and two. You don't really know what anyone's talking about unless you pay attention to the context in which the word is used. Several different ways we use or throw the term seasoning around, especially in regards to cookware, cast iron specifically. You have what's called, what I refer to as the initial seasoning. What that means when I use that term is that you have a cast iron pan that is right down to the bare cast iron. Either it is brand spanking new, or it's one that's been recovered and refurbished, and it's been stripped right down to the bare cast iron again, raw cast iron. There's no oil on it, there's nothing. If you put a drop of water on it or leave it outside on a humid day, it'll rust within hours. So the initial seasoning, and this is kind of what I want to harp on a little bit, is the very first time you seal it with some sort of oil, either vegetable oil, animal fat, whatever you want to use. Please stay away from any automotive or industrial type oils. WD-40, 10W40, motor oil, gear oil. No, let's use a little common sense. Let's not use that stuff. Okay, any food grade grease, fat, or oil. Okay, that's what you want to use on something that you're going to be cooking your food in. Then you have stuff that's referred to as pre-seasoned, and that's usually pans that you come straight from the factory, from the manufacturer, that it already has one round of initial seasoning on it. In other words, they have already baked in some sort of oil, be it vegetable oil, canola oil, flaxseed oil. I don't know if anyone actually uses lard or animal fat from the factory to pre-season their pans. I have no idea. Another term that's thrown around that's in the same category is re-seasoning. Usually that refers to a pan that's already been seasoned, most likely used several times, but something happened. Either you had a buildup of burnt food on it because over the years nobody cleaned it well, and you want to scrape that off, or most likely you left tomato, some sort of acid was used in the pan and left long enough that it dissolved and ate through the original seasoning that was on there, so now you have to re-season it. These three terminologies are basically the same thing. What you're doing is you're protecting raw cast iron with some sort of oil or fat. Now, the reason why we do this is so cast iron won't rust. Okay, cast iron is very porous. It reacts quickly with oxygen and water. Okay, so if you don't season them, they will rust. And iron oxide is not, the red iron oxide is what you end up with, and red iron oxide is really not desirable to ingest. There is a different oxide that these pans put out, and it's a black iron oxide. That is actually what your body uses and can Well, in other words, it's good for your body. Okay, with certain exceptions. I think there's a 0.01% of the population that has a medical problem where they can't have any iron at all, no black iron or anything. It messes up their system. But the black iron oxide is chemically slightly different than the red iron oxide, and that is usable for your body. Okay, and again, I'm not talking about breaking off chunks and eating it. A little bit that occurs naturally from these cast iron pans helps with anemia, and it's good for you. Now, the difference between the initial seasoning, pre-season, and re-seasoning, as opposed to what some people call seasoning their pans after they use them every day and everything, that's actually preventative. That's a little bit different than the initial seasoning. With cast iron, what we want to do on the initial seasoning, the very first time that you're putting oil, some sort of oil or fat, on a cast iron pan, you want to heat the pan up, you want it hot, and you want a very, 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 very thin layer of either grease or oil. You don't want to, I know a lot of people have seen their grandmothers, their fathers, they've seen people on TV when they're done cooking with the pan and they wash it out and they will slather some oil on it till it's shiny and everything. That's fine after the initial seasoning. When you do the initial seasoning, if you put that much oil on the pan, you're going to end up with a gummy mess, okay? The initial seasoning, what happens is, one, you heat up the cast iron itself, and you want to heat it up evenly. Otherwise, cast iron will warp. So you want to put it in some sort of an oven where the heat is even all the way around the pan and the pan heats up evenly. The other thing is you want to preheat that oven. You don't want to stick the pan in there all oiled up with the element or the flame still going and the temperature of the stove not up to what you want it up to. You want to wait until the temperature of the stove reaches its temperature. Then you put the cast iron pan in, oiled, and leave it there, because what happens is the oils that you use, and you can do your research, there are people out there who are a lot smarter than me, they will give you a temperature at which whatever oil you're using, either it be butter, bacon fat, lard, vegetable oil, canola oil, flaxseed oil, there is a recommended temperature that the pan and the oil should be at in order for the oil to chemically bond with the cast iron itself on a molecular level. And there's a certain temperature, and each one is a little bit different for whatever you're using, where that oil actually turns into almost a polymer, and that's where you get your good quote unquote seasoning. Okay, your initial seasoning. Initially your pan is not going to turn black, okay, but through heat and the chemical transformation of the oil and the cast iron, it chemically bonds to the cast iron, and the oil itself chemically turns into almost a polymer, and that makes a good coating. And you want to do that real thin, okay? Think of it, if anyone has ever painted anything, if you slather big thick coats of paint on a piece of wood and it dries, well, great, you have some protection, but it has never adhered to the wood itself. Okay, that's why you put on several thin coats. It's the same with the oil on the pan for the initial very first time seasoning it. This process varies too from person to person and everything. I personally have found that 3 light coats works fine for me, and then again, I'm going to use the word again, then as you use the pan, it'll turn darker. It will keep seasoning itself under regular use. Okay? Some people say 7. Some people think just 1 is fine. Whatever works. Me, I have found that the initial seasoning, re-seasoning of a pan 3 times is great. That's perfect for me. That's what works for me. I also use canola oil. Okay, that's my personal choice. Your mileage may vary depending on what oil you use. So pretty much the initial seasoning and re-seasoning a pan almost means the exact same thing, because you're putting the seasoning on raw cast iron again, and you don't want to slather it on. You want very light coat. That's why, if you pay attention, I will oil a pan, and I like to oil it when it's warm, not hot, because again, cast iron is porous, and it helps open up these pores, and it helps absorb the oil deeper into the pan when it's warm. I will oil it, and then I will wipe that oil off. Trust me, there's enough oil that's been absorbed into that pan so that when it heats up, it will bond, it will harden, it will turn into a polymer, but it'll be a very, very, very thin coat. If you go too thick, it gets gummy. It makes a sticky mess instead of a nice, smooth covering. Pre-seasoning, again, that usually comes from the factory, and they usually only do it once. So even when you get a pre-seasoned pan, it's always a good idea to re-season it or finish the initial seasoning 2 more times before you actually use it. This will just build up that good hard seasoning that you're looking for. Okay, so that covers pre-seasoning, initial seasoning, and re-seasoning. They're all 3 almost exactly the same. Then you have what's thrown out there again every day as seasoning. Okay, the pan is still seasoning. The pan is still getting seasoned. That refers to your everyday use of the pan. I brought some out here, hopefully to illustrate. Now this is a pan, and yeah, okay, the lighting's not that great. Let me turn the lights on. I'll be right back. Let's see if this helps you see any better. That's a little better. You see that nice copper bronze color that's on this pan? This is a brand new pan. It's had the initial seasoning done on it. It has not even been cooked in yet. And the initial seasoning is a 3-part procedure. All 3 parts are the same. Warm the pan up, oil it, wipe the oil off, throw it in the oven, leave it in there for an hour, let it cool down, turn the oven off, let it cool down, pull it back out. When it's still warm to the touch but not so hot as you burn yourself, wipe it with oil, wipe the oil off, get the oven back up to temperature, put it in. Do it 3 times, then cook with it. This here is a pan I did a year ago, and you can see the more I use it, the darker it's going to get. And that's because it's being seasoned more every time I use it. This is the old camp pan. My fish pan is what I refer to it as. Okay? And yes, you can use it for anything other than fish as well, but it's a very old lodge. And unfortunately, when I got it, it had been neglected and it had rusted. So I stripped it down and I had to re-season it. Same procedure as the other two. Same procedure as the initial seasoning. And I don't use this one that much. I did this one about 2 years ago, but I still mostly use it for my camping. So it doesn't get used every day. So even after 2 years, there's still some light spots on the bottom. Okay, it doesn't have 20 years of seasoning on it. This pan, on the other hand, does. I don't think this pan has been re-seasoned or stripped down in 30 or 40 years. So this one here I can actually leave outside for in the rain or in the winter, and it won't rust. All right, there's enough built up seasoning on it over the years that it might get a little bit of surface rust around the edges on the bottom, maybe maybe a little bit inside right here, but other than that, yeah. And as far as cooking tomatoes, putting ketchup in it, spaghetti sauce, whatever, you can use these pans for that. It's just normally you don't leave it overnight. Once you're done cooking with it, you clean it out. This one could probably handle, and it wouldn't take the seasoning off if I did leave it in there overnight. There's enough of a buildup on it, and as you can see, it's still smooth and it's still pretty much non-stick. That's if you take care of them. Okay, so those are the initial seasonings. Now again, when you're cooking with them, they will keep seasoning themselves just from regular use. You don't have to, quote unquote, season these pans every time you use them. There is maintenance. Okay, the maintenance is different than when you are seasoning them. Okay, maintenance is just oiling them. Okay, cleaning them and oiling them. That's it. Every time you use them, when you're done and after they've been cleaned, oil them. Okay, and again, you don't have to pour a whole bunch of oil in these things. I don't like my pans shiny. I have so many of them, it means that I don't use the same one day after day after day after day after day. I cycle through them. Okay, so I don't want a whole lot of oil on it, because if you've ever oiled something and you leave it set for a week, a month, whatever, you go back again, it gets gummy. Not a big deal if you just oil them and you pick them up and they're a little sticky and gummy. Put them over the heat, take a paper towel, wipe them out. The oil itself has not had enough heat to it to turn it into a polymer. It's just air dried and left a little bit of a sticky mess. So once you add heat to it, and you can use a little bit more oil if you want, that will help dissolve the old oil that's on there. Okay, that's different than seasoning the pan. You're just oiling it and maintaining it. Now when you watch a cooking channel, they'll often refer to, well, I've got to season the pan. They're not talking about doing anything specific to a cast iron pan, because they can be talking about, well, I have to season this non-stick Teflon pan. All right, what they're talking about is what was cooked in the pan, all the spices and all the flavors of what was previously cooked in that pan. That's seasoning, and a lot of times they will use that when they're referring to I have to season the pan. They're talking about adding flavors to the pan so that the next thing they cook in it, be it a sauce or piece of meat or the vegetables or vice versa, will pick up the previous flavors that was used. That's what they're referring to when they say I have to season the pan. Okay, they're cooking in the flavors. Okay, they're not actually seasoning the pan to season the pan. They're referring to the flavors that they're keeping in the pan that will transfer to the next part of the meal that they are cooking. So, again, when you are going through the procedure, which I have several videos on, and there's a plethora of them out there. But the one big mistake I see over and over and over and over and over again is when they are doing the initial seasoning, the re-seasoning of raw cast iron, is that they will oil them, and people will put enough oil on it like you do after everyday use. Okay, that's not what you need to do. You need a very, 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 very extremely light coat of oil on these pans when you do the initial seasoning. After that initial seasoning is done, if you want to throw it in a bucket of oil, that's fine, that's up to you. If you want to take a quart and wipe it all over and let it drip dry, that's up to you, that's fine. Okay, again, when the stuff hangs for a few days and it turns into a sticky goopy mess, that's because you put too much oil on it. But as long as you don't bake it at a high temperature, or even put it on the stove on a high temperature with all that oil and that gummy mess on it, you'll be fine. It'll wipe off, as long as you don't overheat it and turn that oil into a polymer. Okay, but again, don't be under the misconception that even after the pan is seasoned, you have to slather it with oil. A little drop, wipe it around, then wipe it off again. That will cover it. It'll keep it from rusting. Okay, and again, everyone tells you this, as you use it, the pan will darken up. It will keep seasoning itself. I just want to try and hopefully this kind of cleared a few things up. Hopefully this will help you. What I like my pans, when I put them away, to have a satin type sheen to them. I don't like them to look dry, and I don't like them to look glossy. Glossy means if I don't use them tomorrow, by the third day, that gloss is going to turn into a gummy mess. Okay, if it has a nice like I said, satin type sheen to it, that's fine. They can hang up on the wall for weeks at a time. That's all you need. You don't have to have these things literally dripping oil or looking like you just painted them with a high gloss finish. That just creates problems. Now I know this first pan I showed you looks like it has a high gloss finish, but that's actually the original seasoning. That's the oil that has turned into a polymer, and it is not sticky. Okay, it is not wet. Okay, the reason why it's so shiny is because I literally polished the cast iron. That's not the oil making it shiny. That's the cast iron itself. Okay, and that's going to shine through until it starts turning black. Once it turns black, it'll only be this shiny again if I put too much oil on it when I get ready to put it away. When I get ready to put it away after it has been used and turns black, it should look like this pan. Just a nice little satin finish to it. Okay? Or like this pan. Nice little satin sheen to it. That's fine. And none of these pans have been used or oiled. Well, this one specifically. This one hasn't been used in a week. This one hasn't been used in about 6 months, maybe 7 months. Okay. Same with this one. I can't remember the last time I used this one because, to be honest with you, I've been trying to use this one as much as possible to get it to darken up and get it so that, yeah, I don't have to worry about any surface rust on it. This one used to be my favorite pan. It still is one of my favorites, but this brand new Lodge that I set up, sanded down and everything about a year ago, really does a real nice job. And one of the things is it's the newer style, so it doesn't have the actual heat ring on it like these other two have the heat rings, so it works on my stove a little bit better, and that's why I really like that new one. Anyway, I hope this helps clear up some questions. Other than that, I know it's a boring little video, and I can't believe I yacked for almost a half hour on this. I'm sorry, guys. Anyway, y'all have a good day, and check out some actual cast iron videos from people that are smarter than me. I'm just telling you what works for me, and trying to help everyone out. That's all. Y'all take care.